usually you can just click and it opens and it's there, but this time I couldn't. I tried on every device I have, and I couldn't bypass the passcode.
Yes, yeah.
So next time,
Doesn't
send the
matter.
passcode.
Yes, no problem.
Okay. So you guys want to be translators, huh? Well, I hope you're not expecting to make a living.
Yeah.
Oh, somebody has some great masks there. Shanti Golio. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like masks. Those are great.
Thank you. They're my mom's.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'm using her office.
What a collection. Does she do that somehow for a living?
No. I think she bought most of these on her honeymoon.
Wow.
Yeah. A long time ago.
I don't know. Do you want to just start by introducing yourselves? There's not that many of us that wouldn't take very long, because I don't have anything planned to say. I just plan to answer your questions. But
Great.
so why don't we just keep going with you, Santiago, since you started?
All right. Yeah. My name is Santiago. I'm from Mexico.
Uh-huh.
I'm currently in Mexico.
In which part?
In the northern Mexico, actually, really close to Texas, in a city called Monterrey.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very pretty, very industrial city. And I've been in Monterrey for the past 6 months. I was living in Portugal before for a little while, and I got back here starting the program. This program, I've been doing it from Mexico.
Okay, great. I guess I saw the write-up of the program, but I don't know that much about it really that I actually understand. But let's keep going. Andre, I'm just going in the order on my screen.
Hi. Hello. I'm very happy and honored to meet you. I think the first book I read translated by you was The Creation and Completion.
Oh yeah, that was the last time anyone read any of them.
Really? Okay. That was a really helpful book, and bilingual and all. It was really great to read and clear and all that. So I've about myself. Well, I've been doing translations for Dharma, trying for over 10 years now, but I've joined this program because there's a lot to learn in terms of Tibetan, and especially spoken Tibetan especially. And so it's good. It's really good to have to deepen all that. So yeah.
Where are you?
I'm in Portugal, and yeah,
You're
the translations
Portugal.
I've been doing into Portuguese, which is actually like a barbarian land in terms of Dharma publications. There's almost nothing, especially the major works. So I think, fortunately, most people, Dharma still flourishes. People can speak English for the majority, so that's good. But
so you're hoping to produce more available literature in Portuguese?
Yeah, hopefully.
That'd be good. Yeah. Well, Lama Paulin just moved there to Portugal.
I haven't met.
You know her? She's a student also of my teacher, Kala Rinpoche.
I see.
And she had a big center in California in Palo Alto, like she put people through 3-year retreat and everything. And then she just up and left and moved to Portugal, put someone else in charge. So you should look her up.
Okay. So but perhaps there's another student of Kala Rinpoche, long time student living here, which is Lama or Sultran, a monk. Sultran, an English monk, I think Scottish born. You might have known.
Okay, no, I don't know him. See, there's lots happening in Portugal. Good place.
Yes.
She did some kind of geographic astrology, and that turned up where she should go. So she did. So there you are. She's really good. Okay, Anna,
Hi.
Hi.
So I think as most of us in this meeting, I am in Portugal too.
Oh, okay.
I think
Wow.
4 of us are in Portugal now, even though I was born in Brazil from Portuguese parents, but now I live here. And I have been working with translations for a while.
Yeah.
I lived at Cadroling. Do you know Cadroling?
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, I know it very well. I mean, I never went there, but I used to translate for Chaktu Rinpoche a lot in California before he moved to Brazil. Yeah.
Okay, so yes, he said many good things about you.
Uh-oh. I loved him. Oh, I loved him. Yeah.
Anyway, and then I lived there for 7 years too, and then I worked with translations during that time too, and then I decided to follow my teacher now, Jigme Khenpo. So then I end up moving to going around, and then finally moving to Portugal, following his instructions too. So now I live here, and Andrea and I also, we are working for Padmakara as the Portuguese branch.
Okay.
So, but of course we don't speak Tibetan. We are doing just like, like instrumental Tibetan and all this kind of thing. So, but it's much better if you actually, speak the language and so forth. So now we are lucky to join this program, and then we are learning spoken Tibetan and all this. So it's been quite interesting.
Great. So yeah, there seems to be, that's an emphasis I see developing here with the spoken. What about you, Katerina?
Hello.
Hi.
Like Andrea and Paul Drupchen, we are all practitioners who connected with Jigme Khenpo Rinpoche, Pema Wangyal Rinpoche. So I've been transcribing teachings, yeah, Andrea, for some years now. Just we have made transcriptions of the teachings given in what we call the parallel retreats, because our teachers come to Portugal twice a year, and we have short retreats, and so I've been engaged with that. And when this opportunity came up to join this program, well, I decided to apply, and here I am.
Great. Okay. Are you in Portugal as well?
Yes, Lisbon,
okay.
yeah.
So yeah, Tulku Pema Wangyal I know since way before at Kanja Rinpoche's monastery up in Darjeeling. He's a wonderful, of course, very inspiring person. So that's lucky they come there. I don't know Jigme. Dani, Dani Yeshe Dawa.
I'm Brazilian, and I'm also living in Portugal right now, but I just come here because I wanted to run away from Brazil.
Yeah, I get that.
But I'm still connected with a Dharma center there, Karmakaju Dharma Center, which is affiliated to KTD in North America. Yes, and I have been helping translating from English to Portuguese, praxis and homages and in small teachings. And I didn't know anything of Tibetan before I entered Dharma Sagar. And of course, my aim is to be able to translate directly from Tibetan to Portuguese, because this is very rare in our language. We mostly do translations from English for everything.
Right.
And yes, and now we have a small group of translators in our Sangha, and we are translating much of the material of Dharma books, which is a website created by Karmapa to make it available, and many precious books and special texts in several languages. I think they have now in 20 languages or so.
Wow.
And we didn't have anything in Portuguese, so we are 5 translators now, translating a lot of content to Portuguese.
Wow. I mean, maybe I should move to Portugal too. It sounds like it's open.
Yes, you should.
More than welcome.
I know quite a few. One of my best friends in my neighborhood here, her son is living there as well. he's an actor. He doesn't have too much to do with Dharma, but his parents were old Zen Buddhists. And yeah, it's like the happening place right now. Very nice. It's really great. And I think you're right that you really lose a lot. Every language that a translation goes through loses more, so to be able to put it directly into Portuguese from Tibetan is really great. And are there any, interpreters, any oral translators from Tibetan to Portuguese?
No.
That you know of?
There's
No?
Drupchen.
Drupchen.
Yeah, okay, good way to go. All right.
My Portuguese is not good enough for that.
Oh, yeah.
But you've done it.
I translated orally from Tibetan to French and English, but to Portuguese I did once for,
Yeah.
it was Kenjepe Masharap's life story. He was telling how he grew up in Tibet and how he came to India, etc. But more than that, I don't think I'll be able to.
Uh-huh. Well, it'll get there. I mean, when, it's probably like when I translated into French from Tibetan orally. That was
Wow,
sort of,
great. I didn't know that you spoke French also.
yeah, once upon a time. And also, if you hear enough, there's these little phrases that you just kind of comes out if it's all around you, since I did the 3 retreat in France.
That's right.
Anyway, Kala Rinpoche did always say the best is to translate into your own language. And certainly, I think that's really true of a written translation, even though there's some amazingly, talented translators that are of various, native countries putting them translations into English, but you can kind of always tell.
Yes.
In terms of the language, you probably have noticed too that someone isn't a native speaker. And unfortunately, there's very few people that are native speakers of Tibetan and of English or any of the target languages. That would be the ultimate thing, because it's so hard to tell with all the little, I have to ask Tibetans on certain phrases, or I used to. Now it's like I can't. I'm on my own. Everybody's locked down, but because there's just these little phrases, and also this spelling is so bad sometimes in Tibetan, but a native speaker can kind of, oh yeah, that means something, even though it's spelled totally wrong. But yeah, so good for you guys for this effort to learn spoken Tibetan. Do you have any one you can practice on there? Any Tibetans in Portugal?
Well,
No?
we are doing the Sukya program basically,
Right.
which you know about, I'm sure.
Yeah,
So-
I was telling Drupche and my students when I was at Naropa, some of them were doing that and they really loved it. So.
Yeah, so at least, we're through Zoom. Actually, we are talking to native Tibetans.
Good, yeah. Do you have like
And
a
that's most of the
partner?
course.
Is that how it works? I seem to remember you hook up with one person to talk to.
Well, basically, we have this manual we study, and then one whole morning we are actually engaging with one Tibetan teacher, let's say, at different days, different person.
Yeah.
So we have about 3 or 4 different teachers, different accents.
Oh, I see. Okay. I don't know. I thought it was that program. I remember one of the students at Naropa, which had a really poor, spoken colloquial Tibetan. It was like a disaster, and really they didn't learn it at all. And so a lot of them were trying to boost it with online stuff. And, one guy like totally falling in love with some Tibetan girl over there. That was his language instructor. Stuff like
That's a good way to learn a language, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why I knew French once, but yeah, and Spanish, because I lived in the Canary Islands for a little while. Yeah, it's a hard one. And I found the oral part of it the hardest to learn. And also because I was like really embarrassed all the time to try. I don't know if you're, it just depends on who you are, I guess, but like I was so terrified of making a mistake that I could hardly speak, you know. And it took a huge amount of pressure. I sort of had to have no choice, you know, had to speak it. It's kind of like one time my French came back in Paris when my wallet was stolen on the metro. And all of a sudden, you know, I was so pissed off that it all came back into French. You know, you have to be like in this pressure situation, I found, to get over the hump. And then, you know, like to get over the mountain. And then once you're there, you're okay, as long as people can understand you. And I also, though, remember that, you know, confidence has a lot to do with it. And when Kala Rinpoche he wanted us all to learn Tibetan for the 3-year retreat. Well, he wanted us all to learn Tibetan anyway. And it helps a lot when your guru tells you you have to learn Tibetan. Somehow there's a magical potion or something. But and then I would speak to him and he wouldn't understand. And then his translator would say exactly what I said in Tibetan and he would understand. And it was like a block, you know, it was like it was because I didn't have the confidence. He just picked it up on this different level, even though it was so frustrating. And then I didn't see him for a little while. And then I came back and spoke to him and he was like, and it was a year later or something. And he bragged to everybody how I had learned Tibetan in a year, even though it was a lot longer than that, because he just wouldn't acknowledge, you know, he didn't count all that time that he wouldn't understand me. And I think that it does have something to do with just jumping in and doing it, you know, just pretend like you know it. And don't try and get it right. And don't, we say, I don't know if you know these weird expressions, but, you know, don't sweat the small things. Don't worry if it's, if you have the right verb tense, or if you're, you know, not using lhasa shesa, you know, like lhasa polite language and stuff like that. I was lucky because, well, you are mostly too, your lamas are kampas and they don't care about that. But, you know, because that, just start speaking it with whatever you've got. And then you can add those things in later. That's what I think is, you know, all those details or not, who cares, as long as they understand you. But I found also the hardest part of oral translation, which by the way, I resigned from that ages ago. That was the first thing I stopped doing because it's stressful and the pay was terrible and you get blamed for everything that goes wrong and you get no credit if anything goes right. And, you know, just in general, it was hard for me, oral translation. And also there was just, I just started to get irritated with the what do we say, the optics, you know, like male lama way high up on some throne, me down, like down at the bottom at his feet, making all the bad mistakes. It was uncomfortable. And also traveling, I have kids, you know, traveling, I couldn't go to the small kids. They never paid for childcare. Actually, Chakta Rinpoche was one of the best lamas to translate for, and he always took care of me. And like every single interview, if someone gave him an offering, he'd give me half of it, you know, just right on the spot. He really, he was sort of horrified that I was, you know, cleaning houses for a living after doing the 3-year retreat. So he tried to boost my, you know, status or something like that. I don't know. Anyway, great Lama. Talked to him, miss him. He told me, by the way, after he had his first stay in Brazil, he said Brazil, he didn't like Brazil because it was full of bandits. But I don't know, I haven't been there. So, so yeah, but it's really important because we'll never, you know, if you can't, even if you're not doing like formal lectures, you know, or traveling with a Lama. I did once travel like in Colombia with Trungpa Rinpoche and translate for him. And then there was a English to Spanish translator, and it was sort of worked out, but it was tedious for people. You know, it's difficult to sit there. You know, they fall asleep while you're doing all the other languages and things. But even doing written translation, you have to be able to ask questions in Tibetan, almost always. I mean, it's very rare to meet a Tibetan who knows English well enough and who's willing to sit there with you to really get the subtle, you know, interpretations of certain words and phrases and things. So you've got to at least be able to do that, you know, converse with a Khenpo or whoever in order to clear up those things. And the person who was helping me a lot, Lama Tempa, now he's stuck in Nepal, and I tried doing it by emails, but it's just it's not the same. You know, his English just isn't quite there, and so anyway, maybe we'll get over that part. We can Zoom more, but yeah. So good on you, as they say in Australia.
Yeah, we
So
have
do you have
been
any
working with a
questions?
Khenpo for we have
Go
been
ahead.
working. Yes, we were working with a Khenpo from Namdrolling in south of India.
Oh yeah.
And the way that seems to be working with us now is that he explains the text that we're like one page for a day. Then he records himself at whatever time is convenient for him, sends me the audio file. Then after I take my notes, I talk into everything. And then after I meet with him on Zoom to ask my questions.
Oh, that's great. I
And
think I have
really
to do
works.
that with
Yes,
this
yeah.
next book because
Yes, yeah. And
yeah.
I have been.
And I know somebody, I had a student in a little class I did on Tibetan, and we had this really, really difficult passage, and she did what you said. He sent an oral message, and he did this commentary on this thing, which was brilliant, just totally brilliant. And I'm just not smart enough. I don't know technology enough to, like, I didn't know you could do that. I just found out you can talk to WeChat. I just found that out from the new Kalu Rinpoche, who's my, you know, digital guru this life. But because he doesn't want to type stuff, you know, he just wants to talk. So I'm slowly advancing now. I just have to figure out how to use emojis.
If we can be helpful for that, then please.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you have a good Khenpo. It was a German woman who knew some Khenpo somewhere, and I had asked many lamas about this phrase, and only this one knew, you know. So there's some real treasure Khenpos hidden in India where I don't know them anymore. You know, I'm just stuck here with nobody.
My brother was in Sherabling for many years, and so we have a lot of contacts there. We can ask Khenpos who live there. Otherwise, then from the Nyingma side, there's Namdrolling Penorum, which is monastery, which has also wonderful Khenpos. Then besides
I think I knew one of them, Tsering, Khenpo Tsering, or Khenpo
Tsewang, maybe Tsewang Sonam.
They traveled with Pena Rinpoche a long time ago.
Yes, I think it's Khenpo Tsewang. This other one.
I
now
had
he's
the
in
terrible
New
experience of translating for Pena Rinpoche.
Okay.
Yeah, but here, you know, not over there.
Yeah, but yeah, we can find Khenpos, or even if it is needed, or I can also spend some time going through Zoom or technology in general, if that can be helpful.
Oh, that's great. No, yeah, I'm so out of it. I'm just figure out, you know, pretty soon I'm just done. So maybe I don't have to know it all.
Yeah, and that's really. Yeah. So asking to the Khenpo, and then after we go together in the afternoon, we go through together the explanation of the Khenpo, and then based on that we do our translation, and it really changes a lot. Like, I think that.
That's great. Yeah, it's always best to work in a group because you get everybody's input, but it's also a lot longer. I
In our
mean,
case, not so much, because everyone has a different language. Santiago translates in Portuguese, in Spanish from Mexico. Then Catarina translates in Portuguese from Portugal. Danny translates in Portuguese from Brazil. And then we have another Nerea who translates from Spanish from Spain. And so each one has his own language, so it doesn't overlap so much.
Yeah, when we first started translating the Treasury of Knowledge, John Controls with Kala Rinpoche, and every year, you know, we'd go over there. It had to happen in person, and in Bodh Gaya, where all his monks would be brought for summer, you know, to be warmer down in Biro Kensei's monastery. And we'd sit around like in groups of like 4 or 5, and it was a really great learning experience, but it would just take forever to come up with like one word, you know, after you argued with everybody and found all these things. And if we had continued that way, it just would have taken forever and ever. As it was, it took like 10 years to finish that whole thing. And when Kala Rinpoche passed away, then the Tsadra Foundation took up the sponsorship of it, of the whole work. But he insisted that no, we work each one, you know, one-on-one, like one person takes one volume, and not in a group because of that time factor. So that's a you know, payoff, like one or the other, which one. And you know, in our case now for Tsadra Foundation, that's such a massive amount of material to get through that we couldn't do it in a group, I think. I mean, there's a little group of translators who meet and just talk about stuff, but I haven't found that so useful because we've been all doing it so long that like we already know what we think. We're stuck in our ways, I guess, and stuck in our terms, I should say. But yeah, you're just starting out. You have no idea how hard it was when I started in the early 70s. The only thing I could do, I'm living in Nepal, and all I could do is, there was like 3 books, right? And one of them by Herbert Gunter, was The Life of Naropa. And in the back of The Life of Naropa, the English translation, there was the kind of what used to be, it was like Wiley, except not exactly the same, but close. And I would go through that word, you know, put it into the Tibetan, look at Gunter's translation and talk about being not a native speaker of English. You know, Gunter's translation, and then try and figure out how he got that from the Tibetan, you know, with the Das dictionary, which was the only dictionary from the, you know, 1800s that all based only on one text, which was the Life of Milarepa. So it was all, you know, this particular dialect. And it was crazy. I'm just, and then I had a couple of lamas, geshes and things around in Nepal that I'd meet with and exchange, you know, teaching them English for teaching me Tibetan. But of course, they always won. They learned English first, you know, and not me learning Tibetan. It was so crazy. There was nothing. So you guys have every option. I mean, you've got the online dictionaries, the thingy translator thingy, the it still isn't quite, it's not, you know, you can't just do a Google Translate yet, but after you're done, after you guys are done putting all this in all these different languages, I bet you will be able to, or get at least pretty close, which is a little sad because experience won't count for anything anymore. So that's, you know, we'll see how it goes.
I think experience will always count.
Do you?
Because, yes, especially because even if you get a Portuguese to English translation in Google, that's a very standard translation. Like it's never the same as you do yourself. So, you know, there is no way to bypass that, I think.
Well, and there's another kind of experience, as you know, like from doing retreat and doing meditating things and doing the practices that you're translating. And but that Sadhguru Foundation originally, you know, only gave the fellowship of Sadhguru Foundation was only for people who'd done 3-year retreat because of that. But then there's just not enough people. And also what's coming out of the academy, what's coming out of universities, people with PhDs that are doing massive amount of research and translation, and a lot of it very good research. And yet we don't even know, do they even practice, you know, let alone, and some of them you can tell make glaring mistakes that even the most beginner practitioner would know. And then they write an entire book with the wrong idea, wrong premise, because they never actually just sat down. And I don't mean like, ooh, you know, super awesome meditative experience type of thing. I mean, just the just the technical part of going through a sadhana, you know, not talking realization at all, or ability to meditate, but just knowing how to go through again and again these things, and then it comes up in the text. And if you don't know what that is, then you know you get mistakes. But on the other hand, that's the majority of translations, and I'm afraid that will prevail. I feel like ultimately that will prevail. That will be people's impression of Buddhism, of Tibetan Buddhism, because, well, partly because they can go on and, you know, they can become professors and have some kind of a career. Just practitioner translators, I hate to say, but there's not that many opportunities. You know, I'm super lucky. I'm like one in maybe 10 that are max that are supported by Sadhguru Foundation, and not with a living wage, mind you, just enough, you know, to keep me hanging on. And it's hard. That oral translation, no, forget it. You know, you won't. It's all about the big star, you know, the Lama, and yeah. So I hope you all have a day job.
As a how to say, shines a little bit to keep a little bit of hope up, at least that Pamakara, you know, Rinpoche, and I'm sure you met Jimmy Rinpoche because he's his brother. So if you went to Darjeeling, he's his younger brother. And
right.
so
I know who he is. I just have never.
He's his younger brother, and they really try to, you know, to have people go through 3-year retreats, and it's still, I think, going on. And even you can see the makeup of nationalities of people who are going into retreat now, and there are many people, you know, from many different languages, which you can see Rinpoche pushing them also. So I think they're not always lost, and because we do see that even, for example, when we look at translations, sometimes that come done from English, you know, the English translation is good, you know, done by senior Pamakara translators who've done lots of practice on it.
Yeah, I know them all. They're all supported by Sadhguru Foundation.
Yeah, and then when it gets translated into Portuguese, and if it's done by someone, you know, who's just translating the words, that you can see many mistakes popping up just from lack of knowledge, lack of even hearing about it, or teaching about a sadhana that probably never really received one. And so you can see that coming. So I don't see how that kind of text can be done without some.
Yeah, I know. It's at the end of the path that I'm on, you know, from my vantage point, it's almost done here, fading away. It's it's hard to keep up the enthusiasm, just because for one thing, I really struggle at all these translations. My life is just sitting here in the office, doing and Tibetans say the same thing again and again and again and again, right? In every text you do, it's basically not hardly any different. And they even have a very limited vocabulary in Tibetan for the Buddhist books. And but then the sad thing is, who's reading it? I mean, I have my latest book that just came out. It's like about this thick for wisdom classics, Tibetan classics. No one's ever going to read it. I was serious. The last good book was Creation and Completion. And, because I was not so caught up in the proper kind of scholarly way to do things in these massive anthologies that I am put to translate. And lately I don't know, it's just a little depressing, but I just keep doing it. Maybe I feel like I do feel like somebody has to make an more or less accurate translation of a lot of this stuff. And then whoever's teaching Dharma can figure out what to do with it. I wouldn't even expect regular people to read it, even practitioners. It's too boring. It's horrible. Why would they read it? But someone who is willing to be like a lama, and teach, they can figure out what's good for people, what their students need. But they need to read the translations. They need to know what the original was, and then they can figure out what people need. But here, I just did a whole class with people at a Shangpa. So I'm all into Shangpa now, because that was Kala Rinpoche's lineage, Shangpa Kagyu, and I'm translating the 2 volumes in the Dhamma Zero and the Shangpa material. And I was in touch with this one Dharma Center in Oregon, and the Western Lama there was like, he's all into it. He did a 3 retreat in Sonata in total Tibetan with all Tibetans, including the Kalu Yangtze Rinpoche. And, he's totally into it, but he's saying these people don't want to figure out complicated sadhana things with 10 million deities and hands and arms and things. They just, at tops, maybe they could do Chinrezi or, Tara, which is not even a Shangpa practices, or not, exclusively. And so that's kind of depressing. And why do people people just want to read Pema Chodron books, stuff real, how to get a little more peaceful in the daytime, or, something. And so we are struggling, and you guys are just starting out, and it's so awesome. I mean, maybe it'll be different in Europe and South America, because I found when I've translated, like in Colombia or Mexico, and I've been to Mexico recently, and teaching actually, recently, years ago now, but that people are a little more, what's the word, devotional, more respectful, more, I think maybe because of a sort of Catholic, somewhere in the background there. And even in France, when I came out of retreat, people were more interested in a kind of religious aspect. In America, no, it's not. It's all tranquilistas, they.
Yeah, this is interesting that you're saying that, because Chagdatu Rinpoche, even though he said he was afraid of the bandits or something like that, but he said that really he liked it very much, because people have lot of devotion, and because they have this kind of more spiritual background, and he really appreciated that.
Yeah.
And at the same time, I think for Brazil, it's really important to have translators, because unlikely Portugal, because Portugal people speak many other languages, but in Brazil it's not so much so. So they really depend on the translation. So it's really essential for, and of course, a lot of people, it's a huge country. So it's really essential to have this for.
And I've heard that center is really big too, right?
Yeah, Pagroling is very big. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, that's what I've heard. Yeah. I think something had just happened. That's why he said that. Some little theft, something happened at the center where something was stolen. And then he said that he didn't really mean the whole of Brazil.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's true. I certainly noticed it. I noticed it in other countries. American, when I came out of the 3 retreat, and everybody in France was so receptive, and we traveled around with Kala Rinpoche to different cities, and it was very moving and everything. And then I came into the States, and the reaction, it was kind of like, well, who do you think you are? Kind of, this challenging of stuff. So it's a little bit different, and maybe it's a great thing. So yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to ask you, because there's something that Pema Ongyon Rinpoche says often, for example, when he's explaining how some books in Tibetan, some teachers wrote books which became very popular and lasted through the centuries, and others wrote books very good, very correct, but they just stay in the shelves somewhere in some monastery. And he always says that has to do with the power of the bodhicitta, of the of the author.
Yeah.
And so he always stresses us a lot on that aspect, and I guess that must apply to translations as well, don't you think? In your experience, like I'm sure you've seen books appear, become popular, and disappear. I'm sure you've seen that. So I wonder if you've experienced that.
Well, I mean, that has to do with, the intention of doing it. And Kala Rinpoche had us read, he wrote a prayer that would do every time before you sit down to work on translation, so that you had the right motivation and kind of bodhicitta motivation and things. It could be, but I mean, I have no way of judging that, because I don't know what people's intention are when they do translation. They don't usually say, I suppose they should, but then that would seem very arrogant. Like, may this book help all sentient people. You don't say that in a book. I don't say anything like, I say, thank you to the editor, thank you to the sponsor, and that's it. So, so there are these kind of scholarly standards for publication that's a whole different thing. If you're thinking about publication, that's a whole nother ball game, whether you have copy editors and other editors and everybody and the typesetters, and it becomes a kind of horrible, actually. But if you're just translating for in-house translations, for like a Dharma center where people are going to be doing that practices, you have a lot more freedom, and that kind of feeling tone, can I say that? That kind of intentionality maybe is good to communicate, and people can feel that, and then those books will last longer, or but the whole thing is pretty frustrating. I've done a lot of research on a couple of the books of things that I really wanted to dig out, especially on some of the women, saints like Machi Glaptun and Niguma and so forth, and trying to straighten the story out historically, and I really go through it, and I prove things, and I cite sources, and I read it. And then the next publication, somebody will still get it totally wrong. And they'll say, oh, Machik was Padampa Sangye's consort or something. Or, Naguma, who was Naropa's sister, was his consort. And a lot of that fault is with Tibetans, I have to say, because they like those juicy stories, it's like their version of romance novels, like with, with those things like $2 novels with pictures on the front, and they want to keep that going, but it's so that is tending to be frustrating, trying to get the real story on, especially on women authors in Tibet, and just having nobody listen. And maybe my motivation is wrong. Maybe I don't have bodhicitta in doing that, and that's why I don't know.
But they're appearing more and more, like biographies of women teachers and all this. So I think they're also doing a good job now because times are changing too, right? So I think this is coming more into different status.
It is. It's just so very hard. And the Tibetans tell the same story. And if you're a very faithful follower of Tibetan lamas, then you have to tell that same story too. And I've had that happen where other translators coming into a conference right after me will just give the same old story that the Tibetans give because they're so, bound to their lama. And so it's like one step forward, two steps backwards. A little bit.
Can I ask?
Yes.
Can I ask? When you think about your last translation and you think about when you started to do translations, what is the difference? What happened in between in your own path, in your relation to translation? What is really important for you at the moment that is different from when you started?
Right. Yeah. Well, that's a good question. I mean, of course, I think every translator is like so really embarrassed about their first translations, but and I change my mind quite often as I go in terms of like terminology in English and things. I'm not very consistent. That's why I never have written a glossary because I can't decide until I'm at that moment, But one thing that I've really, like the one kind of message I have, I guess, is to be into, that's developed over more and more over this time period is wanting it to be eloquent in English. And then whereas when I started, I was just trying to be accurate and sort of faithful, to what kind of too much like thinking like a Tibetan, you have to kind of think like a Tibetan to understand what they're saying, but then you don't write it like a Tibetan, or like, like Chakta Rinpoche, I'm sure you've heard his English. It's like, I used to translate for him and he would just go back and forth between Tibetan, but his English was just like Tibetan grammar. It was English with Tibetan grammar. It was crazy.
Of course, and he always need the interpreter. He like people who don't understand.
Nobody can. And the interpreter had to know Tibetan or you couldn't understand him, because it was all in this mixed up way. And that is a flaw that translators have when they're beginning of being too literal, so of being too like trying to stick. You have to let go of the Tibetan at a certain point. Like one method you could use is translating something very literally as much as you can, and then just put the Tibetan away, put it away, and then try and make it like, how would you say it if you were teaching that subject? How would you say it? And in the Tibetan world, there's a big argument between Dunjur and Sikjur, translating the words or translating the meaning. And this goes back way back. It goes back to the beginning of translation work in Tibetan. But I think you can kind of do both. We've had a number of conferences on translation in here, sponsored by Sagar Foundation, at least 3, and then a lot of help with other ones. And one thing that we know for sure now that every translator agrees, except for one guy, is that there is no such thing as a literal translation. It doesn't exist. It just doesn't exist. Every translation is a new creation. It's a new act, a new creative act. So you just have to know that. And then the important thing is that whoever's reading it in the target language is moved by it in a way that maybe the original readers of it in the original language were moved. They, have a similar experience reading it. And to do that, you have to have good language. And I noticed in Drupchen's, explanation of the class, of the whole class thing, that he mentioned getting what? This is the one that blew my mind. Getting like 4-year education from high school to the end of an undergraduate in the language. I don't know how on earth you're going to do that. But so I've discussed this a lot with Thupten Jinpa. Do you know who he is? The Dalai Lama's translator. And a sad kind of thing that he said, which I'm afraid might be true, is that you're either a talented writer or not. You're either a good writer or you're not. And that is probably kind of true. I don't know that. I used to send the translators, my students at Naropa, I used to make them take creative writing at Naropa at the same time so that they would get some help that way. But I do think there's one remedy for that kind of innate ability, if you're lacking it, which is to read really good books in your own language, like classic, good, well-written, not Buddhist, definitely not Buddhist books, definitely not nonfiction, like good novels, beautifully written, or poetry. And just read that all the time. Keep reading them all the time so that it sticks in. And I feel like people who are in naturally good writers have had like a childhood of growing up reading good books. That's, with not studying grammar, but just hearing it and not, unfortunately these days, like everyone's reading like, what are they, visual novels, or what are they called? Like, there's even the life of the Buddha, and it's a
series.
What are they called? They're in Japan, especially.
The mangas.
Well, like the mangas, but
anime.
Like
graphic
anime.
novels,
yeah,
maybe?
Yeah, graphic novels. I think they're just called graphic novels, where you just barely hardly get any language. And then the whole internet stuff is really bad language. And so unfortunately, we're stuck in this age of really bad languages. Like nobody's learning classic in their own language, So that I think is actually really important. And I, in fact, convinced the people who run the Sadhguru Foundation that was part of my, I am working now because I'm reading this novel. And I mean, this is dangerous for me to say, because now you're going to like look at my translation and think, oh my God, that's not good English. But especially the early ones. But that was a good question. And that is really what I mainly want to say, because if you don't write well, no one's going to read it, and they're not going to like it. They're thinking of Buddhism. It's not beautiful. It's not inspiring. So you have to be, I feel like you have to start to loosen up a little, not to go like wild, like, Gunter, who we mentioned, or something, but you have to, you don't have to always translate the same term the same way, because then you have just as limited vocabulary as the Tibetans did, as the Tibetan Buddhist writers, I should say, because Tibetan novels are a different thing. But yeah, so you use a thesaurus, stuff like that.
Yeah, thesaurus. Yeah, that's
Okay. Hi, somebody. Lobsang Wangdu Dorkar. Hi.
Hello. I think I missed up the GMT thing.
Yeah, me too.
5 GMT, 7 in Brussels, so I don't understand.
Oh, you're in Brussels?
Sorry, yes.
Yeah, you are. Well, that is GMT, isn't it? I don't know.
It's CET here. It's GMT +2.
Okay.
+1.
Well, it's okay. I was an hour late, so I got it all wrong.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think it's recorded, so I'll be watching you.
We're just chatting, really not. I'm not really very good at.
I actually really appreciate that you said that about learning English. In this case, you're talking about English from the classics, not from from the Dharma books, because even other how do you say, for example, we have into Portuguese, we have Dharma books translated by practitioners with different levels of language skills. Then we have also some Dharma books which were translated by professional translators. They're not practitioners. They have a different level. And then of course we have the good authors, the writers, and whatever field. And you can really see a difference. Of course, there are exceptions in every one of these cases. I mentioned there's some good ones, better and worse, but you can really feel that one really has to go get inspiration from the highest level. And there are some habits that we don't have to replicate, in terms of Dharma books that have been done.
Yeah, you don't have to replicate. That's a good way to put it. You don't have to stick with the old thing,
Yeah.
I'm a little bit stuck because I'm working with an anthologies where we have styles that we have to keep a little bit, so it's not like totally all over the place. But but yeah, I mentioned Thupten Jinpa because I feel like he's by far the best Tibetan native translator. I mean, there's not even hardly anyone like him, except possibly, Sakya Trinzen, when he translates his own talk, is kind of amazing. Like, that's amazing. But Thupten Jinpa, and so when I asked him how come how did he get that good? This monk from the Dalai Lama's entourage, and he said it was been reading English classics, like British classics, those really boring ones that one sentence is a whole paragraph, that like. But he loved them kind of growing up. He just read them, and that's why he's so incredible for a second language. And he's the one, to me, the exception of someone who can translate into a target language that's not a native speaker. He's probably better than most native speakers. But yeah, how's the Portuguese literature?
Oh, great.
Is it?
Yes,
are there a lot of great writers?
Definitely.
That's great.
Yeah, on both sides of the ocean.
Yeah.
All sides of the ocean. Africa as well has great African writers in Portuguese.
Oh, really? Oh, wow.
Yeah, and of course each one has different flavor, but what in terms of learning what works in the language, and it helps. And also I find linguistics also helps. Linguistics, like when they analyze the features of each author, how they use, how they write, and that helps like to deconstruct the some of the. But I was actually going to ask you one thing. Is there like do you have like advices that you received on translation that you from your teachers that you'd like to share?
From my Tibetan teachers?
Yeah.
Most of them, I'm afraid that most of them don't get it. Sorry. I know I'm kind of irreverent, I suppose, but I'm very devoted. But other than Kala Rinpoche saying it should always be into your native language for oral translation, and he got that right. But many of the Tibetan Lamas think that there can be a word by word, like, well, just say what I say, and don't quite realize, if they don't know any English, how completely you're not just translating words, you're translating culture, you're translating a whole mindset if you're doing in oral translation. So they, I felt mostly they didn't get that, how hard that is. And I might add about oral translation that I always had to gear it to the audience of each place, even different Dharma centers. You know, I mean, sometimes I would translate for the Shambhala people, because even the Shambhala translators don't speak any Tibetan. So I would be called up to translate for various lamas. And you have to gear the language to them. They have a certain way of understanding things that nobody else has. And, you know, you have to use that language, which I would not use, say, in another different Khargyu Dharma center, even though same lineage Khargyu, you know, but, and so that's another thing you have to take into consideration if you're actually doing oral lecture translations, which, you know, you're going to probably have to end up doing. But yeah, no, other than that, you know, I think what you said that Tukupema said is, you know, motivation is the only thing they've ever mentioned, you know. And sometimes, I mean, it helps. Sometimes translating for a Lama who knows a little English is helpful because they correct you. And Chakta Rinpoche, he used to almost want to hit me. I mean, he would literally, you know, his hand, he used to himself confess that he had a short temper, but, you know, after, I have a limit of 2 hours. And after orally translating something for 2 hours, I like my brain becomes mush, just like mush, you know. And I would say something very obvious and like, you know, I couldn't do it. And he would get so irritated. And now, maybe because I'm a little older, even written translation after a couple of hours, I'm not good at anymore. I can do it, but it's just not nice. It's not, you know, it's not beautiful. I don't care. It's like, what the hell? No one's going to read it. And, you know, so I have to really pace myself. There's something about translating, you know, where your brain wires are kind of they're weird, you know, it's a weird thing to do, not to your brain. And so you have to, like, I don't know, I feel like you have to, if you want to do your best job, you know, you have to acknowledge your capacity that way. I mean, maybe other people aren't like that. Are you guys, can you just do hours and hours? And
I think everyone is the same.
is it?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it depends a little bit, because sometimes depends on the teacher, like you can get so excited kind of thing, but then when we finish, you're completely destroyed. But anyway,
Right.
While you were there, you keep that kind of energy because of the Lama's energy, kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, there's this too, I think.
Yes, I know what you mean. Yeah. And actually, I have to say, Chakta Rinpoche, when he would just speak in Tibetan, it was such a direct transmission, you know, when it was just Tibetan, and he had so much more to say. I almost wish he never had learned any English, because there was so much more that he could do in Tibetan. It was awe-inspiring, and I would feel that way, like I was just getting this like, but also not only are you destroyed afterwards, you know, I found I also didn't remember anything afterwards that he said. It was just like so in the moment.
That's true.
And that also happened to me a lot. Yeah.
Does it?
Yes, yeah. Because I think it's because we're using our short-term memory. We don't have, it takes all the time, so we're not putting anything in long-term memory.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
So
and my short-term memory, and now I'm almost 70, is just about gone. So I probably couldn't do oral translation anymore. So.
Memory is paper.
Yes.
Otherwise,
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess it's kind of for almost everyone, because even Maturika, who is very well known to have a huge memory, nowadays he starts taking notes also.
Yeah. What do you guys do when you do oral translation? Do you take notes or not?
All the time.
Yes. Everybody?
Well, I only have experience from English to Portuguese, and I prefer simultaneous.
Uh-huh.
But notes otherwise has to be through notes.
Yeah.
my memory.
Yeah, I had this like image of that. For some reason, I think of it like when I didn't take notes in an oral interpretation, I felt like I got a really more full and vibrant kind of translation, but I might miss whole parts, like a whole limb, you know. But when I take notes, I get the whole skeleton, but not necessarily the flesh. That was the difference for me. You know, I'd get the whole thing. I wouldn't forget anything, but it would have dropped a lot of the, you know, kind of, I don't know, the flesh, the meat of the talk. But after a while, it's just like, if I didn't have the paper and pencil, I would just panic. So and I could never read it afterwards because it was so crazy, but it was just somehow the act of writing it makes you remember a little bit, even though I couldn't read it afterwards because it would be in Tibetan or English or whatever, you know, or just drawings, scribbles and things like that. But some people, some oral translators I know who have really good memories, I mean, it's amazing. You know, they're really amazing in that. I always think a lot depends on what you did to destroy your brain when you were young, at least in my case. So that, you know, the memory is just not the strong point anymore and you have to make up for it. Like Memento. Did you see that movie? Remember? And he's like chasing someone and he goes, wait, why am I chasing you? Yeah. So, yeah, any other questions or it sounds like you're all in this a lot for the oral translation and you've got the written translation thing down pretty well. Am I right?
In the way that we put it, at least, it's just that I think we're focusing more on the written translation, but then we hope that at some point we get some experience, or when people are fluent in Tibetan, then they can start translating orally.
Okay, yeah.
Yes, I think that would be very helpful because, of course, like we all know it, people who are translating to the languages that we have here are very rare, Spanish, Portuguese.
Yes.
And so it would be really helpful. But I guess that at least for the 5-year program focusing on reason, as far as translation is about, but then of course we focus on studying first spoken Tibetan, then after studying like Shirikunyabdza, we'll do also in Tibetan.
Okay, yeah.
So I guess
the best situation for oral translation is to always translate for the same Lama, because then you know, which I never had that. I translate for anybody and they can talk about different things. And then the study of Tibetan text is really important because you have to know the material. And even a very good translator, if they haven't studied the material, has a hard time with terminology and different aspects. And also even lineages. You know, like I moved from translating mostly for Kagyu Lamas into Nyingma Lamas, and they don't agree on the definition of certain terms, even the terms for mind and things have a different connotation, and you have to learn all those. So, or then you might get somebody who's all, you know, I'm like all practice oriented, and then you get someone who's all they're talking about is 16 different kinds of emptiness or something. And you're, you know, how did you get that vocabulary? You know, you had to have studied it. That was like a horrifying thing, you know, when something like that happens, because I'm not even interested. I'm sorry. I just, you know, it's, and so then, so that studying of classic Tibetan texts is important. Even some of the, I mean, one of the things that I was lucky that I went through with some other Western translators was the whole, like what they used to call jewel ornament of liberation, the Tarpa Targen by Gampopa, because he goes through all the everything just kind of like in this way that's very systematic, and you get all the terminology for all those different kinds of like, you know, the precious human birth and everything from that up to Mahamudra, everything in between. So then you have, at least you recognize those words. And it's why regular Tibetan people, lay people, are so amazed like that I can translate, because to them, the Tibetan lamas are just pretty much speaking gibberish, you know, because they haven't studied the text. Like they don't, it's not their language. They don't get it. So that isn't really important, I think. Both are, it's both important. And especially, as you say, because there's so few translators. I mean, back, like when I was translated for Trang Rinpoche in Colombia, there was only like one known Spanish translator from Tibet, direct from Tibet, Alejandro, somebody, I can't remember now, but I'm sure there's a lot more now. I had one in my class here, Alana. She's really, seems like a good Spanish translator, but yeah, so.
I have actually one question on written translation.
Okay.
If you could tell us about your workflow, your process, you know, how the revision happens, how you're editing the text, if you.
Oh God, yeah, that's horrible. Yeah.
Like when you start, if you could, like, I would love to know how you take it step by step.
Yeah, I almost don't want to tell you because I don't feel like I'm a good example of methodology. You know, my methodology for research, but what you should do, I'll tell you what you should do first, is probably you should read the whole text through and get an idea. And then one thing I've come to understand, just as like part of my lecture there, was the Tibetan writers are very much affected by time and place. And I didn't used to believe that. I used to think it's all like, ooh, you know, Dharma floating above the sky somewhere, you know, not connected to, but it's not true. They're where the writer is from in Tibet and what was going on at the time that they wrote it actually has a really important kind of contextualized effect. You know, you have to know those things. But I do research those things, but I can barely read ahead one page. I don't know, I don't have patience. It's probably why I hate cooking. You know, I just start. I just like, you know, Namo Guru He. Well, you know, I just go like that. And I'm very careful the first time through. I always go back and recheck, but I don't, you know, if I'm hung up on a sentence, I could take like half a day on one sentence because I really try and get it at least accurate as I can. And so I go through like that on whatever section. I mean, these days, working on anthologies, each one is not that long. Or if it is long, I do a section and I go back to that section right away, fairly soon as I finish it, and go through it again. If something sounds funny to me in English, I fix it, but with an eye to the Tibetan, you know, to see, I don't want to fix it so far that it's inaccurate, but, you know, depending on how, like right now I'm doing this kind of just so tedious, horrible prayer by Jamgon Control that he thinks is a namtar, you know, for all these lineage lamas, but it's not a namtar. It's almost nothing about them. It's just stuff like, and then, you know, you understood the three kayas, and, you know, it's just praise on praise on praise, but it's all. So then I think I could even improve what he says a little bit. When it's that bad, I think I can, you know, make this sound a little better, and it's just as devotional, and, you know, I'm not missing any important thing. But anyway, I go through that. And then in the last phase, I guess, I go through everything again. If I have a whole book, I start, you know, so I translate a section, I review that section. If it's part of a bigger section, I finish that big section having reviewed each small section, and I still go back and go through the whole thing. And then when there's a book, I definitely start at the very beginning and go through the whole thing again. Making all the endnotes and footnotes is what takes, you know, looking up quotations and the conjure and the tenjure, figuring out who these people are that they mentioned, figuring out who the texts that they mentioned. That's a lot of time. That's almost the most time. Then finally, you know, you have to make a table of contents. And by the way, I don't know, this is just a random weird thing I've only recently noticed, I think, maybe because I'm doing anthologies, but making the table of contents makes you understand the whole book. I mean, that's, you might even try and do that at the beginning. And then you have to decide how to divide it in terms of in terms of your target language. You know, how do you make it? You know, is there?
You mean the subset? You mean?
Yeah, like
okay.
You know, at a table of contents at the beginning of a book, are each, you know, are you going to put these together in one section and these in another section? Or are you going to, what are you going to call chapters and everything like that? And the organization of the book sort of becomes clear when you write the table of contents. And it's actually a lot of ways to do a table of contents. So that's a thing. And then there's the bibliography, you know, and then there's like of course, there's the translator's introduction, which is where you do most of the research. And it's where I can, you know, you can finally have your own voice totally. And I, you know, I feel like that's my best part usually. And then you give the whole thing over to an editor. And these days in a publishing house, I'm still getting used to this, but there's like a general editor, and then there's a copy editor, and then there's a proofreader. The real important person is the copy editor. The copy editor, if they're good, they will fix all your inconsistencies, fix your grammar, ask you all these questions. I mean, I get them back in, you know, with like, there's just a massive red. I mean, there's so many comments and stuff like that. And that takes sometimes months to go through that. Then you send it back to the editor, main editor. They check with the publisher, and then sometimes there's 2 or 3 or 4, you know, versions that come, and then it goes to the typesetter. And even then you get it back because they can mess up. Typesetters mess up all the time. And so, you know, they'll break it.
Typesetting still exists?
What?
Typesetting still exists?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Why, do you self-publish?
Yeah, we do our own publications, and you know, and of course, I mean, so I didn't.
Oh no, I mean, if you do,
it goes through digital formats, so I didn't think. What do you mean by typesetting exactly?
Yeah, it's all. Of course, it's digital. It's not typesetting like putting.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
so what do you mean typesetting
no.
exactly?
No, they pour it. They pour it. They call it that. You know, they pour it into this format, and that's why the copy editor is super important, because they code everything. So they have it coded, you know, does this heading, is the heading in bold?
I see. Okay.
Is it, you know, and the typesetters are like, they're not doing much thinking. They're just, you know, pouring it in. And so, but things can end up wrong largely because of the copy editor. So like if you want a quotation indented, it might not get indented if there was a wrong code.
Okay. I think we're calling it like book designer or whatever. You know?
Okay.
That's why I like this. Okay, I see
they
what you
still
mean.
call it typesetter publisher. And then, yeah, you're lucky because you don't have to deal with an actual publisher, because actual publishers have to deal with the distributors. That's like another whole business. But in this industry of Buddhist books right now, these people are important. The publishers, the editors, and I I just had the experience of having a not good copy editor and a good copy editor, one right after another. What a difference. You know, it was that one that just came out for Tibet Classics, and it's called 4 Tibetan Lineages. And, you know, when I got it back from the copy editor, I was so happy because there was hardly anything. But then it was because he didn't do a good job, you know, and then I had to deal with it at the other end of like, you know, things not being in the proper place. So, and some of the same texts are in the one that's being copy edited right now for a different publisher. You know, that other one was Wisdom and this one was Shambhala, and some of the same texts, and my copy editor still came back with a bunch of grammatical, you know, she's very, very, very picky, but she made some corrections that the other editor just, and now I'm kind of embarrassed if anyone knows English that they're going to see all this my bad grammar, my bad stuff got through. So, but that's my process. That's kind of how it goes. And, you know, some of the things I do are really exciting and I love translating them. And if they're beautiful, I'm really inspired. And others are just like, you know, see, I tore all my hair out. That's why I have no hair left. So frustrating. So in the early days when I was brought into Sadra Foundation, I would make proposals of what I wanted to translate, but that stopped with these anthologies, and now I just do what they tell me. So that's a little hard. Okay.
Do you also rely on readers' feedback, other practitioners?
Oh my God, if I could find somebody to read my books, I would just prostrate on the dirt for them.
Okay.
I used to, especially for my introductions. If you can, that's excellent. Really good. Especially my advice would be to find non-Buddhist readers. Like they don't know anything, you know, they don't, if you're immersed in Tibetan translation, you forget how people speak. You just forget. You know, not everyone is out there talking about compassion and emptiness, and you know, they're not talking about that. So, you know, and then I had a good friend who was a Theravada Buddhist, so like a different Buddhist perspective, and she would read and help. She was pretty good at kind of like things, but I ran out of friends. I abused them, and then they ran away. They'd see me coming with a new manuscript and get out of here, you know, no way. And yeah, so I don't know, not anymore. I just have to.
But one thing that I think it's good to have both Buddhist and non-Buddhist, if you can find two different like kind of people,
yeah.
Because the kind of things that they notice are very different.
Yes. Yeah.
So then if you can have both, that's ideal. Like if you know.
Oh yeah, it so is. And you know, recently I've been asked to do a couple of Zoom classes for various different things. And I try to sometimes in a couple of the cases it was like a reading group and they would read a book of mine, and they had great, you know, responses and things I would never think of, but unfortunately it's like too late. The thing is published already, but I would use that, you know, feedback in the next translations and stuff, yeah, that I wouldn't notice at all. I mean, yeah. So yeah, if you can do that or do it, you know, give it to each other. And now originally the Sadra Foundation plan was that's what we would do, but no one is willing to read each other's work. That's a problem. It's hard. You know, you're caught up in your own work and like go read somebody else's. But
and also it takes a long time to revise a text. So
yeah. I mean, that's why really ideally working in a group is best, but it's just, there's too much. Those Tibetans just wrote too much. They all every Lama had to write their whole own new conjure, you know, it's just, or own tenjure, I should say, but yeah. especially like we're hung up on Jongun control. He just too much. Yeah. So if you have a focus group that you're aiming for, like the Dharma, let's say the practitioners of Brazil and Portugal or Mexico or something, then try to stick with what is going to be important for them to know. You don't have to translate everything, like, just I don't know how you choose what to translate, but
I think for us, we basically rely on our teachers. We don't really decide what
yeah,
we're going
see,
to
like that's the problem a little bit.
the problem.
Well, I don't know. Going forward into the future, I just don't know anymore. That's why I'm willing to keep working for Sadhu Foundation and do whatever they tell me, because I no longer have a good idea about what people need going forward. I really don't. It's also why I don't like the job description of my title, Lama. It's like, nah, I don't know what people should be doing. So yeah, so you might as well. I mean, if they feel that they do know, if your teachers feel like they do know what's important, do that, then that's fine. We'll see what happens. Or we won't.
We hope so, exactly.
Yeah, well, good. Yeah, good job and good luck with your endeavor. And yeah, it's great that, and Drupchen organizing and figuring out how to do it. It's not easy to know curriculum and development and things like that. So.
Yes, but basically, I think that we're both my brother and me were just kind of influenced by our own upbringing of being in monasteries and studying Tibetan and then talking with them and studying Tibetan and text just like that. And then after coming back to the West and having to translate. So
yeah, you were brought up in a monastery?
Yes, I grew up in Shechen Monastery in Nepal.
Oh. Sorry.
Yes.
No, that's great. Thupten Chodron's son, I met him way back when, and he was dropped off in Kopan, and he wrote a book, and it was about forgiveness.
Yes, yeah. I was lucky.
Not everyone has a good experience about that,
right.
Even though it seemed like such a great thing back then to,
Yeah. I was lucky, I must say.
Yeah.
But I still ended growing up my hair.
Right. Yeah. So who's working in Mexico? Is anybody actually in Mexico working?
Santiago.
Working? Yeah, I'm in Mexico.
You're in Mexico studying. Yeah, but you're in that northern part.
Mm-hmm.
I have a couple of former students with excellent Tibetan skills and things in Mexico.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I'd love to get their contact. I'd love to talk to them.
Yes, there's especially a recent student, Jose Luis, and I can't remember his last name right now, and he just graduated from Europa, and he worked with me. He did a great master's program, translation. And he went back to Mexico City, but then he got hung up with his father needing him to take over his cosmetic business or something. Big drugstore chain, you probably know. They're very well off. But he would love to be in. I hate to see that his talent and all his learning that he, is not going to keep going, because he's really great.
Yeah,
I'll send you his contact. And then I have another one from way back when named Fausto. He's also in Mexico City. He's a little more of a character. I don't even know if he remembers any Tibetan now, but he kind of runs his own little Dharma Center thing.
Okay, if it's okay with you, I'll ask Drupchen for your email so I can send you one. Yeah.
No, it's fine. Any of you can have my email, and I'll put you in touch with them, especially Jose Luis, because
Yeah, there's, especially for me, it just also with Narea, we've been talking so much about just all these new terms that I've never really read or had in Spanish or anything. All these the Buddhist terms and all of that. And I love talking with people who have done it for longer because they have really a lot to say about it.
yes, yeah. No, I mean, he wrote his thesis in English, but I think he's been thinking a lot about the Spanish terminology and everything too.
Cool.
And he's like a super nice person. I mean, you love him. I miss him now. He's stuck in Mexico. But,
nice.
And he got COVID and everything, but he's okay.
Oh, good to hear.
Yeah. So yeah, and as far as Portugal, you all love each other. But you could go find Paul, Paulden, Lama Paulden, one of those lamas. She did the 3 retreat after I did, and she's good.
Yeah, we'll look it up. Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Do you know where she lives in Portugal?
Oh gosh. No, I could find out though. But you could, yeah, Lama Paulden Drolma, I think she's called, and her other name was Carolyn. Carolyn, I can't remember something last name. I known her for a very long time, and she put people through 3 retreats, and she took on the Lama thing. Not like me hiding behind translation. I mean, she's very good teacher, very wise, very good practitioner. So. Oh, somebody did it. Thank you. I see that pop up. Sukha City Foundation. Yeah, thanks. And yeah. And she's well connected. I think you'd like her.
Nice.
So any more questions? I see there's like 9 chats, but I haven't looked at it. Should I look at that? Oh. WhatsApp. Oh no, it's all technical stuff.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Stuff I don't know. I was trying to get the password too. I don't have WhatsApp. I don't have Facebook. I don't have Twitter. All I have is email, and I am on WeChat, but only because Kala Rinpoche needing to WeChat.
Yeah, that's good, I think. I would try to minimize it too.
Oh yeah, I'm so glad. After seeing what happened to America on Facebook, I'm just pretty
All
glad.
over the place. All over the place, right?
All over the place, yeah. But I mean, our country nearly, and still possibly in the trash bin. So really because of social media, mostly. Twitter. Yeah. Well, Brazil too, I should say, maybe.
Same, there's the own Trump there.
Yeah, you've got your own Trump. Brazilian
That's
Trump.
awful.
I'm sorry. I know. It's horrifying to see. It is. I can't believe it. And probably put there by Trump too. But
for the same team, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Unless there's any questions more, I think yeah, I know all your lamas, and that's pretty nice. Feels like we're in the same group. I was just going to tell you, I meant to tell you that I'll end on this one story for Andre when you said, why don't I know the brother if I was up there, Tukupema. And so what happened to me in Darjeeling was that the Indian government absolutely was convinced that I was in the CIA. And were pursuing me and interrogating me. And it's a long, long story about why. But anyway, I was hiding maybe the second time after I got thrown out of India. I was hiding up there in Darjeeling. And I was staying with, when I used to stay in Sonada, then Kala Rinpoche would always, make a space under his bed for me in case the authorities came in and I had to jump under his bed. But that didn't happen, but it got pretty bad and I was blacklisted and everything. And so that I was hiding up in the Darjeeling area and staying with Yorme Dorje, who's recently passed away. Was one of the great translators of all time, really, a student of Kandya Rinpoche. And I'd hide, he lived in a tiny hut and he was working on the Nyingma history. And I never went outside in the daytime because I would get caught, I would only go out in the middle of the night is when I'd usually see Kandya Rinpoche walking his dogs. That's Tukupema's father, But Tukupema would come in to confer with Yorme Dorje about the book, the Nyingma history. So that's why I didn't know anyone else except for Tukupema.
I see.
That was how my life was in the 70s in India, hiding and.
Well, but you were in the best company.
Yeah, it was not bad. Yeah. And to see Kandya Rinpoche in that context of walking his dogs at 3 a.m. was fun too.
Nice.
And it also caused me I escaped one time and ended up doing, by total accident, I escaped to Myanmar, to Burma, and ended up in a 10-day retreat with Mahasi Sayadaw, who was on the Theravada side of things, one of the greatest of the, teachers there. So that was an interesting comparison to Tibetan Buddhism. So they can be good things too.
Of course, yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that story.
Yeah.
It kind of reminded me of Vairocana being chased around also.
Any of the translators.
I was really chased around, and it was so ironic because if there was a single institution that I really loathed and hated, it would have been the CIA. And then to be accused, because I was an unaccompanied woman, they kept asking, where's your brother? Where's your father? Where's your husband? Well, you must be in the CIA.
Therefore.
Therefore, because if you, if you don't have a male sponsor somehow, you're not valid. So, yeah, it was a weird experience to.
The patriarchal view of women being a package of belonging to someone.
If you're owned by someone, I mean, you find it even in Tibetan texts, that, in the sexual misconduct section where don't take a woman who hasn't, somebody else's owner, who's owned by somebody else. I mean, there is that concept of thing. Yeah, it really is alive and well, that concept. So, but it was a weird context to be chased around by authorities while trying to study the Dharma. Like it made it feel like the Dharma was somehow a subversive movement, like a subversive kind of, which was suited me fine. I mean, maybe that's what made it attractive. And it was being taught by refugees, it was definitely, it was like the underground or something. Anyway, I better stop. Now I'm ranting. I will let you go. Thank you for listening. Thank you for your input. And it's great to see.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have been wanting to know you for a long time because I hear about you, like since I was at Carterling, and then it's very nice. I never met you, so thank you for sure. Thank you.
Nice to meet you too. I always felt bad I never made it down to Brazil and there, but
now you can move to Portugal. That's fine. We are all here.
Okay. We'll all meet in Portugal next year in Portugal, as they say. All right. You're very inspiring for me to see, all of you. Really, it's heartening. So thank you. Okay. Shall I leave? Bye.
Yes. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Yes, you're very welcome.